So this is one of those movies I'm kind of surprised I hadn't seen before, but it's one of those ones that over the years it always I was considering watching it, but then I watched something else. I just kind of never got around to it before now. But having watched it, I got to say this film deserves every ounce of praise it received. Even before we get into the themes and the politics of it and that sort of thing, it's just excellent on a basic level. The script's great, the writing's great, the acting's great, the film cinematography's great. Just a really good, solid movie. Like I said, even before we get into any of the politics of it. If I could make a recommendation, because I watched this with my friend Serp, and he had deliberately removed the subtitles before we watched it, and I would recommend watching this film without the subtitles because it adds to kind of Walt's sense of, I don't know if alienation's the right term, but the foreignness of the Hmong people, if that's how you pronounce it, that he's spending time around because you have no idea what they're saying, and that's kind of where he is. And I think it would kind of ruin it a bit if you knew like what they were saying behind his back, and you're kind of left in a similar position to him to just kind of guess at what's going on. But yeah, Gran Torino is a really, really good movie. I think it's one of the best films that deals with race relations and immigration and that kind of thing. I think it's also a good example of how you can separate uh, race from the individual. And I mean, in the perspective that your policy on immigration might not change, your policy on like the differences between races and different cultures may not change, but you might be friends with someone of a different group. I remember there was one Southerner I was talking to once, and he said, Southerners hate blacks as a race but love them as individuals, whereas Northerners hate them as individuals but love them as a race. If that makes sense. And I think this movie is a good example of that. I don't think Clint's character by the end of this film would support mass immigration, but this particular family he does make a bond with. And he kind of compartmentalizes his broader dislike for Asians from his personal feelings towards this family. And I think that is important. I think that's something a lot of particularly conservatives and just people in general fail to understand, where like just because you happen to have a friend who's Chinese doesn't mean you have to support like the complete demographic transition of a country. So that's an aspect of the film I really like. I also just want to, and I do this whenever I cover one of his movies, have to do a lot of praise for Clint Eastwood. I mean, the man is a legend. He's still like, how old is Clint now? He's like 90 years old, I think. Yeah, 90 years old. And he's still making like good movie after good movie after good movie. He's still doing a great acting job. He's still directing. He's still producing. I have to give Clint Eastwood all the credit in the world. I don't know if there's anyone else who's done such an like a string of just excellence in terms of acting and directing, and he is at his like absolute best in this movie in all regards. So maybe let's go into the story of Gran Torino. I think people are probably most people here have probably seen it already. I mean, it did come out. What was it? 12 years ago now, in 2008. So the film stars Walter um, Kowalski, a Polish American assembly line worker who also served during the Korean War. So at the start of the movie, his wife of 50 years dies, and he's kind of entered a state of depression and alienation after it. So his character is really interesting because he is an asshole. He is like a working class, salt of the earth American. He's extremely liberal with his racial slurs, and not just towards like Asians and blacks, but also towards like Italians and Irish, and it's just kind of the way he is. And it's presented as being a very natural thing. And it's not even that he has any particular hatred towards them. It's just kind of the way he is as a working class American. And most of them kind of take it in stride. Like the Hmong people, at least after he gets to know him, don't take any particular offense to it and kind of view it as like an affectionate thing. I can't really repeat any of the words he uses because YouTube will strike this video down. But likewise, his Italian barber, they just like will just give each other trouble. And I guess that's kind of like a masculine thing. I think it's something that women sometimes have trouble understanding, and something that, like, because a lot of guys will talk about how bullying, and particularly in this spheres, is like a good thing and it toughens kids up and stuff. I actually don't think it does. I think when you have close male friends, just part of that is giving each other shit. But because they're your friends, you know it comes from a good place. Like, guys just say stuff to each other like, stop being a pussy, get your act together, stop being like a loser. And it's not like it's serious in that they're trying to give you advice or they're trying to push you in a direction, but because they're friends and because there's a specific context to it, that's just kind of the way it is. And that's an aspect of this movie. Because like Clint's a dick to the kid he's tutoring, and he's a dick to like his barber, but that's just kind of the way guys interact. And he's like teaching the guy how to use that language, and there's a really funny scene where he's like trying to teach him to just like do his working class speech. So at the beginning of the movie, his wife dies after 50 years of marriage, and he's the last white guy in his the city that in the Detroit neighborhood he lives in. Every other house has been occupied by Asians or blacks. There might have been some Hispanics, I'm not entirely sure. But he's kind of the last white guy, and he just kind of refuses to leave and refuses to move. And it's fairly typical for a neighborhood like this. Like, all the houses are run down and falling apart. There's gangs all over the place. A lot of the people are on welfare or unemployment. And he just feels very alienated and kind of disgusted with the direction that his country's taken. And I can certainly sympathize with that because I know where I live, I've seen the complete demographic transition of it in a within my relatively short lifetime. And there is a sense of alienation, and there is a lot of places now that are just very poorly maintained when they weren't when I was younger. I think it's also important to point out that the Hmong or whatever are like Southeast Asian, they're not East Asian. So, like, I don't think, in my experience, Chinese people don't behave this way, or Koreans don't, but they're kind of like, I guess, lower tier or whatever. But yeah, so his wife dies, and his family basically tries to put him in a home, even though there's really no need for him to go into a home because he's perfectly capable of living on his own. But it's pretty obvious that they want his house, and in particular his car. And his granddaughter is like a massive thought, and she tries to like suck up to him because she wants his Gran Torino. And that's kind of a core thing of the movie where everybody wants to get their hands on his car, and it's kind of a symbol of what America used to be, because he built it himself, or at least part of it himself, back during the 60s when he was working at the car plant. So when we're having this, a Catholic a priest, Father Janovich, who I think is in his like mid to late 20s or something, he's very young. But Walt's wife was a very devout Catholic, whereas Walt himself, I'm not sure if he's an atheist, but he's just very cynical and isn't particularly religious. And he kind of keeps blowing the guy off. But the priest is very adamant to try to redeem him and to try to help him kind of get past what he's going through. And kind of over the course of the movie, you see a really good development in the relationship, where initially Walt really really hates him, but they kind of start to get together, and near the end of the movie, Walt makes a confession for the first time in decades, if ever. And he's kind of, it symbolizes his redemption, that this is a very Christian movie. It's somewhat in the background, but it has a very strong redemption or Christ overtones to Walt, particularly as we head to the end of it, where he goes from being a very cynical, lonely, sad person to kind of finding a purpose in life again and something to live for, and I guess more importantly, something to die for. So early on in the movie, it's established that there's a Hmong family that moves in next to him, and the father, I'm not sure if their father's dead or he's a deadbeat or something, but there's a gang of the some of the young male members of the family who are terrorizing the neighborhood. They're getting into fights with other. So early in the movie, the Hmong gang goes to their house and they're like threatening the family next to him's house, and they're threatening and intimidating them, and they really want to get Phao, who's the I guess the young male member who's like a teenager and he's kind of growing up to join their shitty gang. And early in the movie, Walt chases them off with an M1 Garand, and he kind of helps the family out a couple times. Like their daughter, the daughter Sue, is about to get raped by some black guys. It's kind of funny 'cause she's with her like white boyfriend who's a massive pussy, and he's like a wigger. And when the black guys confront them, he's like, "Yo, brother, I'm just gonna buy some CDs and listen to some rap." And they basically shove him off, and then the like Sue, the Asian girl, just starts like going off on them. It's kind of funny because the black guys actually respect her somewhat for not being a pussy. And then like Clint gets stops his car and gets out and like pulls a pistol and is like, "I'm gonna fucking like uh destroy you guys." And the black it's kind of funny because the black guys are like, this grandpa's tough." And they go from like they actually respect him, and later in the movie they're like, "He's a cool dude" or something like that, which from my understanding is largely how it works. They like a lot of people don't respect, well, most people don't respect you if you're a pussy, like if you grovel and stuff. But if you stand up to people and you come at it from a position of strength, they have a lot more respect for you, if for no other reason than you're treating them seriously. Like they're trying to be threatening, they're trying to like intimidate. And the fact that like Clint's character stands up to them and takes them seriously as a threat, I think there's kind of a mutual respect, but also they acknowledge each other as real enemies, as opposed to it being kind of a one-sided curb stomp thing. So the gang tries to get Thao to steal his Gran Torino. Clint catches him and almost kills him. Because he's saved the family a couple times from gangs, they start to try to really hard to make friends with him. They get him to come to their parties. They start giving him gifts and stuff. And he eventually kind of gives in just because he's living on his own. He's lonely. It's good to be around people, even if he can't understand what they're saying. They seem pretty amused by him just because he's old school. I think once again they respect the fact that he's like so racist to their face, that he doesn't like pander to them or anything. He just treats them like he would anybody else. He's just kind of a dick to them, but he likes their food and that kind of thing. Um, and like it's and the family decides to try to do penance, so they tell Thao that he has to go work for Clint for a week. So Clint initially gives him like a really shitty job just counting birds. But then Clint is like, "You know what? I got this free young labor. I'm going to get this kid to do stuff for me." So he gets the kid to start fixing up houses around the neighborhood. I think there's like an old lady who lives across the street. So he gets him to do that. And along the way, he's teaching the kid important skills like how to fix things. He's teaching him how to use tools. He starts giving him some tools. And he starts really bonding with this kid because it's I think he likes him because he finds his kids to be ungrateful, spoiled, and have no sense of respect. And kind of as the film goes on, the kid starts to respect him. He appreciates having a strong male role model. And there's like a lot of good scenes of them bonding, like Clint teaching him to do stuff, Clint showing him how to to a barber. The kid says that he wants to go to university, but he doesn't have a job. And Clint, being like a blue collar guy, is like, I know people in construction. I'll get you a job in construction, but you gotta work hard and you gotta impress them. So he goes and gets the kid a job and like a tool belt and some basic tools and stuff like that. And the kid gets beat up by the gang who cigarette burn his face, because that's kind of a problem in a lot of these neighborhoods, and that's something like that's kind of an issue in the black community in particular. It's called tall poppy syndrome, where if people try to improve their lot in life, they try to like not be a piece of shit, they get torn down and just kind of trampled on it. I know there's a video from the LA riots where there's like this black gentleman who's crying as some like thugs are looting his store. And he's like, I saved my whole life. I worked hard to get a business and to be a respectable member of society. And you guys are like robbing it and ruining my like achievements on the like basis to try to settle the racial score or whatever. And that's kind of the case here. Faust's trying to like, he has like he's gotten better. He's learned some respect. He's learned to interact better with people. He gets a GF because Clint basically bullies him into it, and he just keeps calling him a pussy and stuff like that. He gets a job. He's in a much better place than he was previously, and these assholes are trying to like fuck him over and draw him back into this like shitty ghetto gangster culture. So Clint goes and beats the shit out of one of the members of the gang. It's like, if you come back, I'm gonna fucking kill all of you. And it's cool to see. I think Clint was like 80, 78 or 80, to see this like 80-year-old white guy beat up this like fat Asian guy. It was pretty funny. So in retaliation, the gang rapes Sue Thau's sister and does a drive-by shooting at the guy's house, and the police refuse to do anything because the community's too scared to stop Thau. Sorry, to stop the gang. So I think Clint's character is initially gonna go and attack their house and kill them all, and I think that would be justified. Like, I don't think that would be a mortal sin. It would be like a venial sin at worst. Because these guys are scum. They're preying on the innocent. They're preying on the community. They raped someone. They committed aggregated assault. Like, using a cigarette to burn someone's face is pretty fucked. Like, I think Clint would have been completely justified in killing them. But he kind of comes up with a different way of doing it. 'Cause he kind of wants, I think, to go out on his own terms. And the priest comes by and talks to him, and kind of a theme throughout the movie is Walt won't let the priest call him by his first name. He makes him address him as Mr. Kowalski. And finally, he just says, call me Walt. And the priest is saying he doesn't really know what to do, but he tells Walt, of all the terrible things that you've done in your life, because when you were a soldier in Korea, is this really something you want to do? Do you really want to go out this way with more blood and more violence, or is there some other way you can get out of this? And he's like, what would you do in my situation? He's like, I don't know. And then Clint kind of gets his shit together. He gets a haircut. He gets a suit. He goes to confession for the first time, like ever, and gets absolved. It's pretty clear that he's preparing for some kind of final showdown with the gang. Because I guess, like, at this point in his life, he's really old. He knows he doesn't have much time left. It's pretty obvious he has severe lung cancer, and he's going to die probably in a couple months anyways. But he kind of wants to do some good and kind of have his life mean something before he goes down. Once again, this is a very Christian movie. And he brings Thao to his basement, and he gives him his Silver Star, which I believe is the third highest medal in the U.S. Army. I think it goes Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Medal, or Distinguished Service Cross, and then Silver Star. and he winds up locking Thao in his basement to prevent the guy from going with him. So he goes to the gang member's house and just pisses them off. And he's really loud to get all the neighbors to come out and watch. And then he pretends to draw his gun, which he's not carrying. And the gang members just shoot him full of holes. But they've done this like in public in front of like dozens of people. So because of that, I don't know if it's first or second degree murder, but there's an overwhelming amount of evidence and all the gang members get arrested. So he ultimately took kind of the peaceful way out, but he accomplished what he needed to accomplish. Because those guys are gone, Thao can move on with his life and hopefully become a productive member of society. And him kind of sacrificing himself is once again a Christian redemption thing. So we cut to Walt's funeral, where a lot of members of the Hmong community are there, and they're genuinely a lot sadder and more uh they're sadder and more respectful than his own family is, because his family just wants his house and his car. So at the will reading, it says, I'm leaving my house and my worldly possessions to the church because it's what my wife would have wanted, and because his family wasn't there for him really when his wife died, but the priest was there for him and helped him to become a better person. But he leaves the Gran Torino to Thao on the condition that he like doesn't turn it into a beater mobile or cut off the roof or otherwise alter it. And the last scene we get in the movie is Thao and his GF driving away. So once again, it's a really good movie. It's very wholesome. It has a lot of heart. I think it takes a very uncompromising view of race relations and interpersonal relationships. I don't think it really holds anything back. Like, it doesn't really condemn Walt at all for being politically incorrect or racist or anything like that. It just, I think he kind of learns to maybe separate the individual from the group and to kind of realize that these are two separate concepts. Which I think is unimportant, but I think it just as a coming of age story and like the story of a kid who's kind of a loser and doesn't have a proper role model, male role model. And I think that's pretty base, to be honest. I think every young boy needs a male role model to discipline him, to teach him things, to show him like as an example. And he's really only had female influences in his life. And if Flynn hadn't have shown up, he probably would have joined the shitty gang and gone down that road and wound up dead in a ditch of a heroin overdose or getting shot in some fight with some other guys. So I'm going to say overall, Gran Torino is a excellent movie. A friend of mine who watched it with us referred to it as racist up because it's the old bitter white guy whose wife died and was taken over and takes on like some Asian kid to be his uh, like apprentice and to be the father figure for him. So that's pretty good. So this movie gets a 5 out of 5, probably a 10 out of 10. Excellent, excellent film.